Now, I bet you've never met someone who's turned their life around this drastically. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to our next guest, Nick Bastianelli. He was off to a really rough start in the beginning, which he's going to break down in this episode, like from the battle of addiction to trying a few different experiments and then eventually finding his big win. Now, I don't want to spoil it for you, so ladies and gentlemen, Nick Bastianelli. Hey man, how you doing?
Doing great, man. How are you today?
Oh, fantastic. And what was your name?
My name is Nick Bastianelli.
Nick, thanks so much for having us today. We'd love to know a little bit more. Do you remember the first time you made $100,000 in a year?
I absolutely remember. Yeah, it was life-changing.
Dude, you got to take us back to the time. Where were you in your life? What types of things were going on?
Okay, so I'm trying to remember the year. I think it was 2019. Long story short, it was my first year in real estate sales. My wife and I opened gyms when we were really young. I was 23, and I think we incorporated when she was 19. Started that business. I think she was 20 when she opened. But long story short, we owned gyms. I transitioned into real estate very reluctantly, and my first calendar year, I made $100K.
Okay, so first of all, you transitioned. Why did you transition from the gyms?
Yeah, so we opened gyms when we were really young, and we were super green. We both loved business, but I had been an entrepreneur my whole life, but operating like a fully fledged, legitimate business. This was our first one. So the gyms are wildly fulfilling. There were CrossFit gyms here in Michigan. We had one. We opened a second one a couple years later and ran those for 8.5 years. They were super fun and fulfilling, but they did not provide the income level that we were looking for our family long term. So I had a mentor who lives like 50 minutes from where we're sitting today. He had been a friend for a long time, a mentor in many capacities in life and in business. He owned a real estate brokerage and had been an appraiser at that time, probably at least 20 years already. I spent a lot of time with him, but I'd go on this annual golfing trip every year with him and a lot of his buddies. And I didn't even really like golf back then at all, but these guys were all really successful and had a lot of the things that I wanted. And so I went intentionally just to kind of be a sponge and be around people who had what I wanted. On the way up, one year in particular, that mentor, he was driving us. We were in his Jeep, and he asked me again to become a real estate agent. We were really having a challenging time financially at that point in our life. And so I took a leap of faith. I literally just figured this guy is way more successful than me in a lot of ways. And so I'll lean on his advice and take a leap of faith, and I went for it. So let's see, I got my license in June of 2018. I paid no attention to real estate in any capacity. We had 2 gyms, like so young, 2 babies. My wife's mom, who was like her best friend, and I was very close with her as well, she was sick with cancer. And so we were busy. I really didn't put any attention on real estate. I just really want to underline that. It was not the priority. Maybe 5 months later, end of November, I had a close buddy ask me to help him buy a house. I closed my first house, and honestly, I got to the closing table and saw the commission check and was like, holy shit, what just happened? Why do we own gyms? Like, we have to totally reevaluate our life. And so that began the conversation of us prepping our gyms for sale. The good news is we've surrounded ourselves with people who are ahead of us in life always, intentionally. And so they always told us to begin with the end in mind in our businesses. We had processes and procedures documented. We had staff. And so we started prepping those gyms for sale. You know, really that first closing was the catalyst for us to start getting things in order for us to get out of the gym business.
Now, what was that number that you saw that made you say, holy shit?
Back then, the house was $225,000. So it would have been maybe $3,500 or something like that. It was in the 3,000s, and that was mind blowing. We had owned gyms for like 6-7 years already at that point, and we were still paying ourselves $400 a week each. So $3,000 at once, over $3,000 was just like totally eye opening.
How did you meet that first mentor? The one that you're golfing with and hanging out with?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been sober since I was 20. And so he was a dude that I respected in that community of sober people. Yeah.
And what made you decide to get sober?
That is basically I started using when I was like 12 or 13 years old. Started with alcohol, and it just snowballed from alcohol to like low level prescription pain meds. I started smoking weed pretty much right away when I started drinking when I was very young. Vicodin snowballed into every other pill imaginable, cocaine, ecstasy, got really heavily into Oxycontin. Like I said, I've been entrepreneurial my whole life. My parents got divorced when I was 12. I stayed most of the time with my mom. She was very strict, and so she watched my bank account. I knew that she would figure out if I was spending money on drugs and alcohol. So what I started doing is I started selling drugs so that I had money off the books that she would have no idea about. So I basically had to find a way to fund my drug and alcohol use. All that Oxycontin turned into heroin. Maybe sounds crazy to some people, but it was just a business decision. I knew Oxycontin cost me more, so I could continue to sell that at a higher amount, and I could do heroin, which was cheaper, I guess. And snorting heroin within a week turned into injecting heroin, and I was 17. So things snowballed very rapidly. I went to inpatient rehab for the first time on my 18th birthday to outpatient. treatment facility, Suboxone clinic. I was back inpatient again 6 months after my first visit, in and out of programs for years. So there really is no short answer to why I got sober, other than I watched many friends overdose and pass away. And I watched everybody go to jail and some to prison, and people kept catching cases. And so it was just really bad. If you're interested, for whoever's watching this, I can tell you like the last night that I used, that was kind of like the breaking point. I guess the straw that broke the camel's back, but just an accumulation.
Thank you. We appreciate you sharing the vulnerability.
Yeah.
And, the truth behind the story.
Yep.
That's, I know a lot of people might resonate with that and might be facing their own battles that they don't necessarily speak out loud. So we appreciate you sharing.
Sure.
And it's very inspiring to see the types of things that you turned around to.
Yeah.
So you ended up getting into real estate, and that was your first
did.
$100,000 in a year.
Okay.
Now, do you remember the first time you made $100,000 in a month?
Yes, I do. It was in real estate. It was probably the next year.
Break it down, man. Come on. Because not a lot of people do that, right? 100 in a month. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, 100 a month was cool. So the first year, about 100K in the first full year of real estate. And I just kept building, right? So we had our 2 gyms. That first year was cool. It was all word of mouth. It was literally probably all people who belonged to one of our 2 gyms. And so I was, for people in the real estate industry, I was all sphere of influence, right? All sphere of influence. I wasn't even long enough for people to be referring randoms to me. It was just everybody I knew. So that was the first year, did 20 deals. The second year, though, I had gotten most of my tasks and responsibilities for both gyms off my plate. My wife, Nicole, was taking care of a lot of the CEO related tasks. And then we had full staff at both locations. So it freed up a lot of time, which was our goal. We literally set hour related goals for my tasks. Like, hey, we're going to get you down to 10 hours. Then we're going to get you down to 5 hours. So we were very intentional about that. So my second full year in real estate, I doubled my business, and I'm sure there had to have been a month in the summer where I was close to 100K. I don't know if I was, but I assume that second year I probably did that. If not, it was wildly close.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it seems like you weren't even paying attention to the numbers. You must have been focused on just doing the work.
Yeah. So I was so new in the industry. I have like a very strong desire to learn. Like I'm just motivated. I'm competitive. I'm internally like self-motivated. And so I was really just trying to get my bearings and figure it out. I felt like I had an exceptional opportunity, like available to me. Again, real estate was not on the menu for me at all. So getting into the industry and seeing what was possible was so eye-opening for me. And so I was just trying to learn as fast as I could. I was trying to get around people who were way further than me. I knew real estate was obviously a very old industry, right? People have been making a lot of money in real estate for a long time, and I did not want to recreate the wheel. So, I'm still a constant student, but even like then I was really just trying to build a really strong foundation. Yeah, I don't know if I was like counting my money a ton then. I was just like so jacked that it was coming in and just trying to like figure out what the heck was happening.
So, I've spoken to a lot of real estate agents, and it seems like in your second year building a team, like that's pretty impressive. Some agents don't even get to that point after 20 years in the game.
Yeah.
What do you think it was? Like, I know it was mindset, number one, but what were some of those things that you were thinking about? And what were some of those actions that you were taking at the time?
Yeah. So I operated as a solo agent for the first 3.5 or 4 years in real estate. So I didn't have like a full-fledged team then. I was just being very intentional about the people I was spending time with. So I guess you could somewhat call that a team. I was just constantly looking for people who had what I wanted in the industry and who seemed to be doing it in a way that I would like to do it. I prioritize relationships over income. I know that good relationships are much more valuable to me than an immediate or a short-term income windfall. So I know that if I treat a client very well, sometimes I have to tell them to walk away from a house, and I might, what some people think, maybe I'll lose like a $10,000-$15,000 commission, right? Like if they bought this $500K house, that'd be $15,000 in my pocket. I think some people think very short-sighted like that. We're going to shove them in houses as quick as we can. And that has never been a priority for me. I would rather tell you, Javon, or anybody, like, hey, this house is not actually a fit for your needs. Me as a real estate professional, I don't think this is going to work out for you long-term. And so I guess it's always been prioritizing quality of relationships and being good to people over money. And as a result, people have taken really good care of me and my family.
Now, were a lot of these relationships just like, service provider and client, or were there other real estate agents that you were rubbing shoulders with? Who were some of these people that you were surrounding yourself with?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm always trying to learn. So I read a lot. If I'm not reading, I am always listening to a podcast. I haven't intentionally listened to the radio in a car in at least 10 years. So if I'm not listening to a book, then I'm probably listening to a podcast. If I'm not listening to a podcast, then I'm listening to something I have selected on Spotify. And so, I thought of my car far as like a mobile university. So maybe that's an unconventional answer, but I had mentors through all these books and podcasts, first of all, right? I felt like they were packing years of hard-won knowledge into something I could digest in whatever, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours. So that's the first thing. But also I was actually getting around other agents and brokers locally, real people in the industry who knew way more than I did, and just trying to learn from them, trying to be of service and be valuable to them in the meantime, right? So that I could kind of like earn my keep. So yeah, it was just other agents and brokers, talking to them.
As a realtor, right? Connecting with other realtors is competition.
Yeah, no, I don't believe that at all. But yes, I do know that people do that.
Yeah. So how would you approach it?
I think this is really important in real estate, but really in any industry and in life in general. I think you have two options in life. You can operate out of a scarcity mindset where you are constantly worried about yourself and thinking, like, I see this a lot with agents who are super cutthroat in the industry, right? Like, there's more than enough houses for all of us to sell. You know what I mean? There's more than enough business. I don't have to do something nasty or say something nasty about another agent or broker to get a deal. That's not how I operate. So I think people who are looking at things from that lens or perspective are operating from a scarcity mindset. There isn't enough, so I need to fight for what I am going to get. There's a place where you can come from of abundance, right? And that's where I try to spend all of my time. That's been an intentional thing I've worked on the entire time I've been sober since I was 20, because it wasn't really natural for me back then to think like positively or from a good frame. And so I just believe there's enough houses for everybody. And I freely share all of my tips, tricks, and secrets with literally anybody who calls me. I've done that enough times to know that I could tell them every secret in the book, and most people are never actually going to do it. But even if they did, I want them to be successful. I just think rising tides raise all ships. Our saying in the gyms was we rise together, and I have literally tried to build my whole life off that. I want to be a person that when I die at my funeral, there are people there who I have inspired, right? I want to have made people's lives better. And that is my highest priority, like leaving a legacy, right? Not making the most money or being the most cutthroat competitor. That's not my end goal or aim.
Well, I'm definitely one of those that you've inspired, man. So thank you.
Well, thanks. Glad to do it.
Nick, man, thank you for sharing that perspective. Do you remember the first time you made $100,000 in a day?
Okay, I haven't made $100,000 in a day yet.
Not
I
yet.
think no, not yet. I think that's probably not too far off, to be honest. But I have made it in a week. And this will be interesting. We'll see if people count this. But I was still pretty early on in my real estate career. I don't know if this was the second year in real estate or the third. I guess I could work it back. It happened in 2020. I actually did it in a week. I purchased the house I grew up in from my mom. Me, my wife, Nicole, and our kids. The first house we bought was a condo right in Novi, 10 minutes from here. It was $104,000. We had literally no money. We borrowed $1,000 from each parent, and I didn't have the first month's rent when we moved in. I actually was crying the day because my wife, Nicole, was pregnant. We were young business owners. We had no cash. I literally didn't know I was going to pay the first month's rent. We just did what we do. We moved into that condo. We were young. We fixed it up. I'm very comfortable in construction. I did that for years. My dad's been a builder my whole life. We made that condo nicer. We sold it, 2 years later. We netted, something crazy for us back then, 26 grand or something. And we bought the house I grew up in from my mom. We did the same thing there. We renovated it. We sold it for a lot more than we purchased it. I think we netted, I don't remember what the net actual gain was, but we got a check for like 87 grand on closing day, which was literally mind blowing.
Yeah.
We had invested a lot, over 2 years of living there. I had renovated the entire main floor basically. But so that check happened. And I also had 3 closings in the same week. So I don't remember the exact figure back then. I don't know. It was probably like 108 or 110K in a week. It was like a 5-day span, and it was just mind blowing. I was so excited. I could not believe it. So
What did you spend it on?
we dumped it all into this house. Yeah, we bought this home. So yeah, we've been really intentional about the way we spend money. Like I said, we grinded it out for a really long time in the gyms, not making any cash. And so we became very good at the cash flow game. Right. And we got really intentional. Even when I started growing my income very rapidly in real estate, we stayed living on a max of 25% of my income. And so we were paying off debt very rapidly, and we were throwing money in investment accounts very rapidly and living off very little. So, yeah.
Very interesting. So what types of things are you paying attention to now? What type of things are you after? Where's your headspace?
Within the last, I think this is the 7th month, I transitioned from a solo agent to operating a team in real estate, right? So what happened is my real estate sales business basically just got too big for me to handle on my own. An agent had approached me. She's wonderful. My director of operations, Alexis, she's the best. She came on board and she just kept taking on more and more things and doing incredibly well. So I'm very grateful for her. She helped me build the team out because I was basically like living in my truck. Not literally. I was on so many appointments every day of the week. And, I wanted to make money to have a quality of life with my family. I want to make money to spend time with my family, and I'm no longer spending time with my family because I want to make more money. So we built out that team. Now they take most of the buyer business. I still list a ton. So I'm very active in real estate sales still, but I bought back a lot of my time because in like March 31st of 2022, we started very actively investing in real estate. So I built out the team to buy back some time because I knew I wanted to get very heavily involved in the investment space. We bought our first short-term rental on March 31st of 2022. 9.5 months later, today we have 20 with, obviously we have investors involved there, but I'm very focused on real estate sales, that team, growing a great team and a great culture. And then additionally, in the time I bought back, being very intentional about real estate investments and growing that business as rapidly as possible.
Man, and you're still so young. I feel like I'm sitting courtside and watching this game being played. It's magnificent from this field of view.
Well, thanks, man. I'm very grateful.
Appreciate you.
Just doing our best.
So if you could go back and meet, even that 12-year-old Nick.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's when things started getting spicy for you and started making some of your own decisions. What would you tell him?
Oh man, I would have just told 12-year-old Nick it's going to be okay. Honestly, I didn't know I had like mental health challenges going on my whole life. And so I honestly just felt scared and uncomfortable literally all of growing up, like deeply uncomfortable and not a part of. If there was a way that I could have told 12-year-old Nick in a way that he would have believed that he would be okay, I think that would have, so it's the best thing I ever could have said to myself. I was just so living in fear. I had such a intense scarcity mindset.
Well, if you could go back to the Nick that started gyms.
Yeah.
Because that was a different Nick. You were in a different place at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you tell that Nick?
Man, the Nick that opened gym, so I would have been 23 at that time. I would have really told myself to enjoy it. I still look back on those years of owning a gym as they're likely to be some of the most fulfilling years in my whole life. Operating the gyms, we met most of the closest people in our life through those gyms. We got to live in a gym all day. Our kids made obstacle courses and they were surrounded by people who deeply loved them all growing up. And I miss it a lot. I spent most of that time terrified about how I was going to take care of my family because I was new in business and trying to figure out how to operate a real business. And I wasn't good at it, right? I wasn't good at creating income for myself or my family. Nicole and I just didn't have enough experience. So I was scared all the time. And I would have just told me to enjoy it because I miss it. Yeah.
Well, Nick, we appreciate it, man. Any points of wisdom that you want to share with the audience before we rock and roll out of here?
Every day I try and just think of that famous poem about the man in the arena. And I think most of life is not about knowing what to do, but it's just taking courageous action on a daily basis and being consistent over broad periods of time.
What is that poem?
Basically, it just talks about it's not the critic who counts, it's the man in the arena. So I think all the time, these like sideline coaches, right? Or you'll have haters on Instagram and Facebook. And I think a lot of times people like booing from the sidelines are not actually participating. What I think every day is that I have to live my life in a way where I have enough faith to participate, right? To take risks and take big actions, which are regularly scary, even though a lot of times I don't know how I'm going to figure stuff out. I just have faith that I'm going to be okay. And even if I don't, I try to take action anyways. And I think that has made my life really good. I think I've learned a lot because I put myself in situations where I have to learn in order to survive. And I think that's good.
Beauty. And Nick, before we leave you, where can we find you?
Okay, you can find me on all social media channels at Nick Bastianelli, and you can find our real estate sales team at thebastianelli.team.
Beauty. Nick, thanks so much, man. We appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of 100 Ways to Make 100K. Once again, I'm your host, Javon.ca. And Nick, thank you so much for sharing your story on this episode. I know this one's going to touch the hearts of many. So once again, we are 100 Ways to Make 100K, where you can find us on all platforms, and I'll see you on the next episode.